My roommate had been in the shower for more than 4 hours. Before I got home around 11 p.m., I stopped by my usual bar to relax after a tiring day of paperwork at the office. By this time, I had already had about 4 drinks. My whole body was limp, and I was about to fall face down on the ground as soon as I stepped out the door. I lay down on the sofa, lit a cigarette, and opened YouTube on my laptop. The video of the luxury cruise was about to start playing when I heard the door open. I sat up, tilting my head just enough to see my roommate walk in. He hung his coat in the closet and, without saying a word, slowly walked towards his room. This action was quite normal. I had lived with him for about 3 months, not too long, but long enough for me to grasp most of his habits. This guy is really a man of few words. He will never open his mouth unless someone initiates a conversation, but I don't really mind. His meticulousness and carefulness have given him the habit of cleaning the house regularly, and his quiet personality keeps him away from any conflict. So I really had no reason to complain. So I went back to watching YouTube. About 5 minutes later, I heard the shower in his room turn on. Again, nothing strange. It's a good habit to shower after work. Right now, I'm watching bare-knuckle boxing with half-closed eyes. I was probably only 2 minutes away from falling asleep. A few hours later, I woke up in the dark, my head spinning, my throat dry. I slowly sat up, calming the tired feeling, waiting for it to subside a bit. Once I was settled, I reached for my phone to check the time. It was almost 3:30 a.m., as far as I could remember. My stomach was churning with hunger, so I got up and walked towards the cold cell, only to discover something. A faint but ever-present sound in the background. It took me a few seconds to realize it was the shower. Suddenly, the events of the previous night began to flash back to me. Drink at the bar, call an Uber home, check laptop on the couch. Roommate comes home, shower turns on. I stand there for a moment, trying to make sense of this strange situation. Maybe he went to bed and forgot to turn it off? I shook my head. That couldn't be possible. Or maybe he slipped and fell in the bathroom. If that was true, it would be really dangerous. I rushed straight to my friend's room, but the bathroom door was locked. I kept knocking on the door. "Hey, are you okay?" No response. I thought about kicking the door down, but decided to call 911 first. Quickly took my phone from my pocket, preparing to dial the number, when the notification of an unread message appeared. It was from my roommate. "Hey, I couldn't sleep, so I went to my girlfriend's house. Don't know when she'll be back." It was sent 2 hours ago. I stared at the bathroom door, then looked back down at my phone. This fucking situation was really wrong. First of all, my roommate rarely texts me, and certainly never to say he's going out. Second of all, he's clearly been single since we've been together, except for being in a relationship. And if he's in a relationship, there's no way he'd tell me. Third, who was in the shower? I tried calling him, but no one answered. I sent a few more messages, no response. I stood there for a moment, hesitating, and noticed his wallet and keys still lying next to his laptop on the desk. My mind started to spin, so I decided to go back to the living room and turn on the light. I kept pacing in circles, trying to figure out the situation, ignoring the sound of running water. I never thought the sound of a shower could be so terrifying under any circumstances. A moment later, I heard something vibrating on the kitchen counter. I went closer and realized it was my roommate's phone. Panic set in. I immediately grabbed my keys and rushed out of the apartment without hesitation. I ran across the hallway and down the stairs to the lobby. But even that wasn't far enough, so I decided to hide in the McDonald's across the street. I sat there for a long time, considering calling the police, but for some reason I felt too nervous to make the call. Even though there was almost no one inside the store, I felt that the place was starting to get stuffy. So I decided to leave and step out into the deserted streets. Almost immediately, my intuition told me that someone was following me. I glanced up at the apartment above. Soon, I saw the balcony of the apartment, but there was a figure standing there. A straight, stiff black figure that almost looked like a doll. It wasn't that cold. If you looked closely, it was swaying a little. I was frozen in place, unable to comprehend or accept what I was seeing. That thing was definitely not my roommate. It was tall, taller than any human I had ever known. So much so that its head almost touched the ceiling of the balcony above. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make out any details about it. The darkness was pitch black, and the distance was too far for me to see clearly. But something in the back of my mind made me come to a different conclusion, that this thing simply had no angles to observe, that the only element in its composition was pure darkness. Of course, my instincts urged me to run as far away as possible, but my consciousness told me that if I tried to run away, this thing would definitely follow me to the ends of the earth. Instead, I went back to the McDonald's, locked myself in the bathroom, and finally decided to call 911. I told the dispatcher that there had been a break-in, and that I had managed to sneak out when they weren't looking, but that they were still in my house. Yes, I had made up the most accurate story that reflected the situation without making me look crazy. The dispatcher said they would be sending the police immediately and reassured me to stay calm. I left the restroom and sat at a table near the door. A few minutes later, red and blue lights cut through the darkness of the quiet night. I rushed outside to call the 2 police officers for help. The desk was now completely empty, although the passenger door was still ajar. They fired me a series of very difficult questions, like, was the intruder armed? Did I have any connections to anyone who might be an intruder? And what were their intentions? And so on and so forth. Obviously, I didn't know. How could I know? But they kept asking. Before long, I was so annoyed that I yelled at them that if they wanted to know, they should go check it out for themselves. Perhaps the worry and fear in my voice was enough for them to start taking the situation seriously. I was told to stand by the entrance and watch them slowly enter the building. With a sinking feeling, I paced back and forth just below the apartment building, growing increasingly anxious about what they would say to me when they returned. A few minutes later, the silence was broken by the deafening sound of gunfire. My heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I stood still, not knowing what else to do. Another 20 minutes of silence passed, and the officers still hadn't returned. Soon, the sound of a loud siren came from the distance. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by 4 police cars. The scene was chaotic. Officers were shouting over each other over their radios. Questions were thrown at me. And of course, I couldn't answer any of those questions. The next scene was complete chaos. The building had been evacuated. The residents were frightened and confused as they were led outside. The officers were becoming more and more frantic. Multiple gunshots were heard, interspersed with screams and other incomprehensible noises. Almost immediately, I was bundled into the back of a police car. After being taken to the station, I was led into one of the interrogation rooms where 2 men in suits were waiting for me. There was no introduction, just a flood of questions. Each one seemed more bizarre than the last. What company did your roommate work for? What was his job? How many different people had been in your apartment since your roommate moved in? Did you ever hear voices in your apartment between midnight and 3 in the morning? And those voices weren't from your roommate? Did you ever see a group of people standing outside your apartment in a circle, very tall, between midnight and 3 in the morning? And one question made me jump in panic. Have you ever seen someone standing at the foot of your bed when you woke up in the middle of the night or 3 in the morning? They immediately disappeared a few seconds later. If so, do you remember what they looked like? Was there anything special about them? As the interrogation questions continued to be asked, my mind began to recall strange things that had happened after my roommate had told me. Scary situations that I had dismissed as a product of my imagination, simply because I have no other way to explain them.